Hey, what is up everybody, Blades for here, and today for you guys another video of Persona 5X. Inside today's video guys, we're going to be going over if Riko is worth it, or just is she worth it in general to at least pull for, whether you're either just new, middle ground in the mid game section, or even the in game section. Now some of course my in game people might know this, but some people are a little bit 50-50 on this, so I'm going to be trying to at least clear up exactly what this character is worth for most people and what she's worth for other people as well. So if you guys are interested in this, be sure to sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. As always, hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out quite a lot, especially with the YouTube algorithm kind of giving me a little bit of a problem, but you guys have been making it worth it every single day, and I thank every last one of y'all for that. But before we get into this, as always, be sure to check down below in the description and join our Discord. It's called Gotcha Metaverse here, in which I'm going to be keeping you guys as updated as possible when it comes down to at least P5X, when it comes down to just anything regarding global, TW, KR, CN, and it's a nice little hangout place whether you play other gotchas or other games in general. So check it out and let's get straight into it. So for the video, we're trying to go over at least Wind Vast here, which is the new evolution of Wind, or at least the new variant of Wind here. Now this variant of Wind, as always, is dedicated as a buffer, and I gotta say she's a pretty fun one and a pretty useful one. Without a doubt, I was not expecting her to be as broken as she really could be, or as really good as she is, but she's able to actually give us a lot of crit damage, SP recovery, and more, which is really helpful depending on at least a couple teams that she's going to be ran in. Now of course this character does have its ups and downs and pros and cons, much like of course other characters do. It's not as broken as like how Cord was, where you can just deal with her at A0. Wind is kind of one of those characters where you can deal with at least her at A0, but he requires a couple more aspects in order to really utilize her to her full potential and actually utilize her correctly. Now these aspects kind of hold her back, some of them kind of elevate her, but for the most part it's kind of like a held back. As always, crit damage buffer pretty much scales basically on crit damage and SP recovery. Nothing too different there, just normal stuff that we've went over in the past. But with this as well, she also can buff the other thing that a lot of us really like, and that's attack and crit rate. This is really making her a pretty much a +1 no matter what for all DPS type teams. So whether you're running like what's it called, let's say if you have A1 or anything like that, you can put her on multiple teams. So you can be running her with Joker, you can be running her of course with A0 being Mont, you can run her with all these valuable teams that need crit damage and crit rate and just attack stats in general, and that makes her really good. The only downside to this is she is reliant on a little bit of her dupes, or at least one of her dupes to an extent, to go on multiple other teams. Sure, you can place her on other teams without the said dupe and keep her A0, but in that matter of just anything, the man Leon, who is a 4-star, actually performs way better than her, which is kind of the issue at the end of the day. We kind of want to make sure that Wind gets the spotlight for a lot of things here, and that's what kind of dedicates her worth, especially when it comes down to at least multiple teams. But her being at A0 isn't all too bad. Her being at A0 is actually pretty darn good. Let's go ahead and talk about it a little bit more. A0 pretty much allows you to at least, I want to say, go into a team of your choosing being at least a Wind team. This Wind team is of course going to be specialized with Mont, of course, seeing she is our main Wind DPS. But of course if you don't have Mont and you do have another Winded character, you very well can use Florette, in which is this character right here, seeing of course they have multi-hits and Winded type statuses. This actually isn't too bad, to be honest. She also can really go into other teams, but that's where the A1 kicks in. With A1, pretty much all this allows her to do, in which, where does she go real quick? Let's go ahead and pick her up right here. With A1, this pretty much just allows her to go into multitude of teams. Pretty much how A1 is described, what this is, when you do have this, it's no longer when taking wind damage, she's able to of course increase certain things here, right? She's able to apply those certain effects. But now when she takes any elemental damage, pretty much, this allows her to give you additional crit damage taken, or at least additional crit damage by 30%, and also increase the said Phantom Thief, who is an AoE DPS here, attack by 25%. Now this pretty much makes her way more useful for all teams. In general, that's where the A1 kind of holds back the A0, and that is a huge ordeal, because with that A1 it immediately changes her conditions of what she can be used with compared to with A0 what she can't be used with. A0, she's immensely less useful compared to at least that A1, which is kind of why I feel like she's in that kind of medium category. But in the future, with proper, of course, running mates and of course SOS evolving more and more, she more or less is always going to be the best unit. And I'll let you know exactly why with this here. With this being a crit damage buffer and attack buffer, as well as a crit rate buffer, she is a on-fielder. She no longer has to be a navigator. So normally if you do have the navigator, let's say like Futaba here, who's really helping out your team DPS wise, now you will have Futaba and her on the same team, elevating one of your team's sides on SOS. There are always two uses for at least SOS itself. There's always the first side, which you have to use for a team of 4, of course, and then there's the second side, which you need a team of 4. Normally in your first side, you're going to be running, or either second side, either one of your teams, whichever's better, you're going to be running Cord in that team. Having her and Cord in the same team doesn't really work out. They kind of butt heads a little bit, but you can use them together. It's just not really worth it. So usually you're going to have Cord being the buffer of that team. So your secondary team is now going to need a buffer. In the past, we used to use Leon. We usually use like Riddle sometimes and things of that nature. But now, instead of at least relying on those guys, you can now rely on at least Win, seeing she's keeping up your SP recovery, she's keeping up your attack percentage, and she's keeping up your crit damage. But this all comes to the cost of at least, of course, having more dupes on her, or having at least one other dupe on her to really get her to that useful standpoint. It kind of keeps her down and jam-packed with certain teams, which can be a little bit of an over-downer to certain things like that. But just by having her, of course, you can even more so not really have to worry about sustaining yourself too much here, and you can actually now start running at least an HP related persona to really help out your team and keep them kind of recovered, instead of having to do instead of having to actually kind of babysit, right? You no longer have to have that babysitting type aspect, and it kind of frees up Wonder as well when it comes down to at least your whole team aspect. But with this in mind, what about her weapons? Is it worth it with the character as well? I did recently do a video on this, and this is another standpoint that makes it so for certain people, Riko isn't going to be too worth it, or at least Wind isn't going to be way too worth it here. And that's because this weapon is technically a mandatory thing with her. She doesn't need dupes of it or anything like that. But with the 4-star weapon, she works immensely different and like way different when it comes down to at least her output of helping your team. And that means more gems you have to spend, more things you have to invest in for this character, making her a lot less likable. Pretty much if you don't have this weapon, it's going to make everything a lot harder. And already if you're going with A0, you're already bound to one team. So having 2 negatives is not a good thing, especially just not make a positive in this stand. Now, if you did have, of course, A1 and you wanted to go with like a 4-star weapon, you very well could go with a 4-star weapon. You're still going to be held back a little bit, but at least it's more reliable to some extent, which I feel like it's this aspect, as I said before, that is really going to hold Riko back. But as long as you got those down, you can do whatever you want to do with this character. Now, let's go over to the skills here. Some of her skills, I gotta say, are straight up worth it. Okay, you're getting a lot of buffs out of this character here. You have, of course, Fragrance of Time, which, although it is very expensive, which I think it was this one here, if I remember correctly. No, this one says 50 SP. I gotta find the other one here. It might be this one here, but I gotta make sure, because all of these guys are always so randomly placed, and with the names it's always weird. But one of these skills here, of course, you're going to be increasing. Yeah, it is this one. This one here, you're going to be actually increasing, or at least consuming, all your SP. With this in mind, you actually get yourself a decent bit of crit rate on all your allies, but on one person you also get a ton of crit damage. And based on the amount of SP that you use, you actually will then be getting yourself overflow crit damage based on her own crit damage she has. This character, without a doubt, is going to be very picky. You got to build her to the maximum capacity, hitting those caps and making sure you're just at those caps and not overflowing on each of her things, whether it's SP recovery, crit damage, attack. You got to make sure that she has those caps to get the most out of her buck, or at least the most out of her whole entire kit. If you don't have that and you're not being very picky with her, that's where things are going to get even more so worrisome. Seeing one, now you have to worry about a team, you have to worry about having the weapon, and you have to worry about having the utmost best of stats to actually run this character. Granted, I'm making her sound like she's absolutely just horrific for most people to get, but when it comes down to just mainly everyone, she's a really good unit. Just her worth it type compatibility is going to come, at least I want to say, rely on how your account goes. Overall, this character is absolutely amazing. She's awesome to see. She has a lot of things that are in her kit that are actually kind of insane, but it comes down to say, who is she best for? Free to play people. If you do not have win, I'm gonna straight up be honest with you. If you do not have win, you're not playing, or not win, sorry, Mont, and you're not planning on A1ing win and getting her weapon, I do not suggest you to summon for this character. I'm being dead honest with you. You won't really have a use for it, because let's say you get A0, but you don't get the weapon, she's useless because you don't have a team that she can really go into. Let's say you get A0 and the weapon, she's still useless at that point in time because she's meant to be ran with a wind unit. Very well, you could run with Florette, but I feel like the absolute use of this is still going to be not too good, mainly just because you can use just Leon at that point in time. Like, if you just don't have the weapon, you might as well use Leon. If you have the weapon and you don't have Mont, it's still going to be kind of iffy depending on at least how your Florette is built. Though of course you very well can have it, it's just going to be kind of weird. So free to players, try to avoid her if you're not going for any dupes. As for my people who are in mid game and end game, I would highly invest, at least expect to use this character quite a lot, especially if you're using her for SOS or doing SOS. You always want to have at least a buffer on your first side, and you want to have a buffer on your second side. So by doing both of this, it's going to help out your elite score overall, and that's going to be really, really helpful depending on how you of course play the game. She's going to be a very valuable asset, though if you're mid game and in game, just the same as the free to plays, be sure to get her of course A0, and be sure to get her 5-star weapon. If you do not have that, you're going to be having a little bit of a problem, especially if you don't have Mont. But of course, if you're in game and you don't have Mont, but you're going for the A1, then knock yourself out. Definitely summon for it. All in all, I find it very worth it. She's very awesome. Just free to plays, definitely try to skip this one if you can't invest into her very much. Same goes for mid game and in game players. If you can invest a lot, do it. Can't, skip. But that's my opinion on it. I'm not your mama at the end of the day, so if you guys don't really want to listen to it, go ahead and summon. That's perfectly fine with me. Not my account, but gave you guys some tips. Till next time, everybody. Peace out.